Okay. So Ugo, social anxiety is something that we all experience every now and then, right? But for some people, it's an actual problem where it gets in their way of their ability to actually make friends and build a social circle, which is not good. So for people that really experience it at that level, is it because of human nature and just like personal genetics, or is it more of childhood experiences and social environment?
It's more of childhood experiences. And I notice in my practice, a lot of people who I treat for social anxiety, uh, they're usually very high functioning on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
right? And they tend to work in the STEM field, right? And they're very intelligent people, but they have this intense fear of socializing with people. And I think part of the issue is a lot of them were not diagnosed until later in life. What happens is with the parents is that if Junior is doing well in school and getting along reasonably well, he flies under the radar. They don't notice that Junior has a problem socializing until he's in high school, maybe
Hmm.
towards the end of graduation. And I said, "Hey, this is a big problem."
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So it seems like it's more childhood experiences. Now, you mentioned that most people they don't really get really treated until they get a bit older, right? So for parents, how do you know if your kid is just like shy and kind of on the like quiet side versus someone that actually has a real social problem?
Does he have any friends in school? Does he, if the kid is very very young, does he get invited to uh birthday parties? If you attend a parent teachers conference, what is the teacher saying about your son? How well your son uh behaves or gets along with other kids? And because parents tend to be focused on how the kid is performing in school, which is very important, but also keep a lookout for that. Keep a lookout for that.
Okay, okay. Now, when it comes to friends, like, is there a certain amount of friends they should have? Because sometimes people can have social anxiety and only have one friendship, but that friendship can be a bad influence, right? So, like, how do you know, like, how many friends a person needs? Because obviously, this is going to depend on who the kid is, like, just on like a normal, uh, like personal level. So, like, how many friends should they have in general, if you had to say?
Um, you know, Anywhere from 3 to 5,
Okay, cool.
right? With three being
Hmm.
on the low end, more quiet kids will have a close best friend, and it's something to, you know, point out and notice. And if a kid's birthday, if you, this is if your child is young, child's birthday is coming up, and dad says, "Hey, I'd like to invite some kids from your classroom to the birthday party," right? And
Yeah.
that's when it comes out. That's when it comes
Okay.
out and about where your kid is.
Okay. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So, why do they have this like natural tendency to go into STEM?
Well, in my experiences working with individuals like this, I find that they're just very bright in the STEM field. They're very bright in the maths and sciences, extremely bright, and uh, and it seems that there's a trade-off with how bright they are and just how well they're able to socialize and get along with other people. And it's not that they don't want to socialize; it's that there's just an awkwardness for it. I think part of the issue that happens is, especially when you're dealing with people on the spectrum, is that uh, their their ability to think logically and reason and do well in math and the sciences
Yeah.
is more advanced than their peers. And then their ability to read social cues, socialize, get along is less advanced, right? And most parents miss out on this because if you address this earlier on, you can make changes. Because I work with teenagers with social anxiety, and I could work with guys in their 20s with severe social anxiety. It was just missed out. Nothing was addressed, right? And so
Hmm.
I teach them how to develop social confidence, and it's difficult for these guys because by the time you're in your 20s, you're becoming more established in your profession. Maybe you meet somebody, you get married, you start a family,
Yeah.
and most people are friends with their coworkers and stuff like that. So they don't have that much access to friends as they would if they were still in school,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not to say that adults don't socialize; they just don't have that much access. That it's more based around people you work with and what have you not.
Got it. Yeah. So when it comes down to the social confidence and like social opportunities part, we'll definitely get into that because that's really important, especially as people do get older. Now, you mentioned that one of the problems when they're younger is that sometimes because they're so bright, people might not really understand what they're talking about. Like they can't really find things to build friendships on, right? Because if you have a certain level of, I guess capability intellectually, you're going to be interested in things that kids your age might not be interested in, right? So that's a major issue there. Now, is there any other things that happened in their childhood that led to them being so socially anxious?
Yes. Then, for those who are not on the spectrum, then you have childhood trauma, right? And it can range to direct abuse, ongoing abuse, the breakup of the family,
Mm.
the absence of a parental figure, father or mother, you know, and in which junior gets lost in the mist. So yeah, those are also contributing factors as well.
Okay, so it seems like it all comes down to family dynamics specifically, right? And then
Hmm.
obviously, if it comes down to childhood trauma, that can go in various different ways. So okay, so it seems like the main two things are trauma and like family dynamics, and if those two are not handled properly, it tends to lead to social anxiety. Correct?
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Now, one thing you also mentioned is that social media tends to really accelerate social anxiety,
Yes,
especially among the youth.
yes.
Right? So, yeah, why is that?
So social media gives you the illusion that your world is smaller than it is, and it takes you out of
Mm,
cultural context, and it gives you the idea that hey, this is how I'm supposed to behave in. These are people who get attention. Uh, you know, it it's it creates this illusion as to what your life should be, and especially if you're socially awkward
yeah.
and you don't have much going on for you socially, it's easier to be led astray because a lot of people on social media are putting on the show, right? They're
Yeah.
they're putting on an act, and healthy people don't act that way in real life, and it's important to know that.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like the main problem is that, the world seems way bigger than it actually is because I guess especially nowadays, we can see everything that's going on in like every corner of the world, right? And when you're constantly getting hit with that stimulus, it can really, spike up your anxiety, right?
Hmm.
And then obviously the other one is making them feel like they're not good enough. People put on an act.
Yes.
Yeah, what's really interesting because like when I was younger, like 7 8 years ago, when I was in my late teens, social media wasn't as bad as it is right now. Back then, it was more about filters and so on and so forth. But now the stimulation of social media has gone to a whole new level with like short form content. I'm not sure if you're on social media, but like the short form content has really taken that to a whole new level and so on and so forth. So social media is more
So
damaging
short
now.
short form content is the maybe 30-second videos on YouTube that you scroll
Yeah.
horizontally. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's shorts. Yeah. So like that was something that came in like 2022 ish. That wasn't really a thing back in the day, but like that tends to really spike up anxiety even more because like content creators only have a certain amount of time to get your attention, right? So like you scroll on the video and it's just like something crazy going on over and over and over and over again. So it's gotten really bad. Now, because of that, what age do you think it's good for younger kids to get social media? Is there a certain age that you would really recommend, or not really?
You know, between I would say 16,
Hmm.
do your best as possible to keep your kids out of social media. I don't allow my kids on social media. Um, uh, if I find out about it, I'll talk to them about it. But do your best to keep your kids off social media. If you catch a child on social media, go through what they're looking at and have a conversation with them about it and encourage them to focus on what's going on in the immediate environment.
Got it.
Right? You can't,
Hmm.
it's not going to be 100% because kids go to school and they get influenced by their peers
Yeah.
and somebody has a phone and say, hey, check this out, etc., etc. So it's important to have a strong relationship with your children, and so you can talk to them, especially when you notice how they dress and what's going on with them, who they're talking to on the phone, and stuff like that. So ideally, 16 is the time when they're mature enough, and then you can have a conversation with your kids about what they're watching on social media.
Okay. And then, like, what would you really view as social media? Is it just like Instagram, Twitter, and so on, or like would YouTube be a part of that as well?
I'll put YouTube as social media as well.
Huh. Okay. So pretty much all screen content, like aside from movies and TV shows and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Great. So that's good. Now, so let's talk about different ways that people can really build these social skills, as you talked about in your post.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that people struggle with nowadays is the ability to start conversations. And obviously, social media is a big part of this because now we're always just scrolling. If we're bored, we just have to look at our screens, right? So, if you don't have the ability to start conversations, you're never going to be able to build deeper friendships. And that's obviously going to end up in loneliness and even that's going to go down a whole new path. So, how do people really overcome the ability to break that social anxiety and start conversations with people? Like, how would you do that in a real, genuine way?
I would when I work with my clients, I encourage them to greet people. Make eye contact, greet people, say hello. If you're a teenager in the classroom, start
Yeah.
talking to your peers in the classroom. Get to know them. How's your day going? And then practice to listen to what they say. Give them some attention, and you're going to get some attention in response, right?
Hmm.
So greeting people or being cordial with people goes a long way, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So you don't want to wait until you go to a party setting to socially interact with people and you feel really nervous and awkward. You just make it get used to talking to people, get used to people around you, and then build up from there.
Okay. Now, what if, because so when it comes down to just saying hi and so on to people, right? That tends to be easier when you're in a place that kind of welcomes that. Obviously, when you're younger, you have school, you have different stuff after school and so on. But as people get older, other individuals, they tend to be a little bit more closed off if you just like greet them, because
Hmm.
obviously, again, because of the fact that we have so much news nowadays, people tend to be much more wary of strangers starting conversations. So how do you
Hmm.
overcome that without kind of looking weird and just try to build relationships with people like that?
Context matters. Depends on where you are. Depends on the scenario where you are. Um, I would definitely say if you struggle with social anxiety, start off go to a place where um you're expected to be socially interactive. It's a lot easier, right? And then if you're in a place where you're not necessarily expected to uh, uh, be social or whatever it may be, you gotta learn how to read social cues. Make
Mm,
eye contact,
yeah.
and if you're interested in talk to that person, say hello to that person and gauge if the person is interested in having a conversation with you.
Okay. Cool. Now, one of the things you mentioned is to use compliments, right? So yeah, I
Yes.
mean that's one of the best icebreakers, right? Now, what would you recommend are the best kinds of compliments to really start a conversation?
Um, it's funny. I complimented somebody today on a cardigan that they were wearing.
Oh,
I
yeah,
said, "Oh, that looks very soft and comfortable, etc., etc." Right?
yeah, yeah.
But then again, I know this person. But
Okay.
it could be. I'm honest about compliments.
Mm.
It could be what they're wearing, an accessory they've got on, what a vehicle that they're driving. It could be really anything in particular. I'm just not going to be inappropriate about it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I guess yeah, just like basic observations, clothing, certain things that are going on, I guess, in your social environment. and stuff like that. Okay, great. Now you mentioned social cues, right? Which is the second thing you mentioned in the whole world of social skills. So when people are suffering with social anxiety, they tend to stay home more. They tend to be by themselves more, and they kind of struggle with the ability to read nonverbal cues, and that's really bad because if you don't have the ability to read that, you can really um, struggle with connecting with people because people can say the same set of words in two different ways and have it mean two different things, right? And then if you
Mm.
can't tell the difference, people might look at you as someone that they might want to stay away from. So if people know that they have this problem with reading nonverbal cues, how do they build that skill?
Some in severe cases, you could have a professional teach you, right? If you have a close set of friends, you can ask them if you're reading the person. So people who struggle with social cue the most are people on the spectrum.
Really?
It's just they're just socially blind to it, right?
Yeah.
But you can teach them. They can learn it. You can say, hey, here's what to look out for. Everybody else can pretty much pick up on social cues. They may not be able to identify what they're seeing, but they're noticing the changes, right? So
Hmm.
somebody who's not on the spectrum, who's just very sensitive and what have you not, if they notice, hey, this person is in a foul mood, you can work with them to say, yep, you're absolutely right about that, and teach them not to be reactive about what they're observing, right? Rejection is not a bad thing. It just means that you and that other person are not compatible.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you say go and see a professional if you have to, right? Like, who would
Mhm.
that be? Like, what would be the name of that professional? Like
Well, I'm a
what kind? Yeah,
psychotherapist.
like a
Yeah, I'm a
psychotherapist. Yeah.
psychotherapist. In the state of Arizona, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I specialize in social anxiety and ADHD.
Yeah.
So somebody like me, you go see. You can see a psychologist. Um, yeah, these are the types of people that you can see who can help you out.
Okay, cool. Now, one of the things you said is to teach them, right? And obviously, when it comes down to reading nonverbal cues, it goes much more than just like telling someone, hey, if someone looks like that, because it can be hard to really understand that if someone's telling you verbally, right? You most of the time you pick up that ability by just like through osmosis. So you talk about the idea of using movies, like watching movies and talking about the emotions behind that. Um, how would people actually look into that, because sometimes movies can be a little bit over dramatic, right? So how do you use movies to actually build the ability to read nonverbal cues in like a real human way and not just like an overly dramatic way?
You know, if you're looking at, say, a B-rated movie, right? The acting doesn't seem to be all there. If a properly produced movie where the producer focus on subtle behaviors of the actors will usually convey to the audience what they experience in their own life settings, right? And
Uh-huh.
I movies are not something that
Got it.
I primarily rely on.
Mm.
I actually rely on, so if I was working with you, for example, on social anxiety, I'm going to rely mostly on what you are experiencing in your daily life. So chances are you're experiencing certain interactions with people and you're misinterpreting those interactions. And with the data, the information that you're giving me, uh, we can come up with a proper interpretation and have you go out and re-engage with that person or not. Right.
Okay.
So movies are not 100%. They're not very reliable,
Mm.
right? It's just an example.
Got it. Now, would you say the same thing about like reading fiction books? Because oftentimes they go like they dive into the details of a person's like inner world, right? So that can really help build empathy too. No?
Fiction books are much better than movies.
Got it.
Fiction books are much better than movies.
Okay. Do you have any like recommendations that people can look into, or is that not your thing?
No, it's not. I mean, that context matters. Depends on
Yeah. Yeah.
what type of fiction that you're reading,
Okay.
right?
Okay. So like what do you mean by context? Like just depending on.
depending on what you're into,
Okay.
depending on what you're into, the more realistic the novel is, or the story is, or the fiction is, the more you can relate to it, the more realistic it is,
Got it. Okay. I
right?
see what you.
And then again, it depends on what the character is doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? The character may be making good or bad decision, but it's important for you to be able to differentiate that, like, okay, this character is making a bad decision.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah. So focus on stories that have like realistic narratives and aren't, kind of out there overly dramatic and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Got it.
But it's important to note, it's very important to note that your life experience for you are most important. Okay, so a lot of people with
Okay.
social anxiety, just because of their poor participation socially, they have a bad habit of discarding what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, and what they're hearing. But that's very important, because they're getting feedback from the environment that they're ignoring, right? So, hey, I experienced this today, and then we can talk about it and determine how you should interact with that person in the future, if you should interact with that person in the future, right?
Okay.
The big demographic of people who struggle with social anxiety, I already spoke about people on the spectrum, high functioning, guys, and this comes to finding a romantic partner, right? They really struggle in this department because it calls for them as guys to take assertion,
Yeah.
to be assertive, and also to read the girl's body language. And what I find is that a lot of guys, when they come to me, this is what they're really looking to achieve. This is what they're really concerned about,
Yeah. That's a
right?
big fear, eh?
That's the big and and they make improvements. You can make
Yeah.
improvements, and you can learn to get past your fears. Um, it's not terribly bad to be socially awkward,
Hmm.
right? It's not terribly bad to be socially awkward. Um, Fear of rejection is overrated. You have to,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you have to learn to see yourself as a human being and see other people as human beings as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, you just mentioned fear of being rejected. So as you probably know, like that's probably the biggest reason why people end up in social anxiety because they don't want to feel like they're not good enough when they've been rejected. And again, that probably ties back to something that happened in their childhood where they felt like if they were rejected, they probably were made to feel like they just weren't good enough, right? So how do people really mentally overcome that fear? And then also, how do you move past the fear of being rejected, while maintaining that same enthusiasm? Because you are going to get rejected at some point, right? So how do you just mentally have that ability to just constantly move forward and be okay with it?
Fear of being rejected comes from an inferiority complex,
Yeah.
right? So if you're not being successful in making friends, socializing, and whatnot, at some point in time, you're going to start thinking that something's terribly wrong with you. Oftentimes, I find when I work with people in this predicament that nothing is wrong with them. They just don't have properly developed social skills, right? So it's an interesting dilemma, a situation where I see a nice person, and he thinks something is wrong with him, and he's afraid of socializing. And I met somebody else who's on the sociopathic scale, who's just a terrible person. They do terrible things, and they think that they're great people,
Oh, really?
right?
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I say to the guy, I say to the socially anxious person, "You're a very good person. Trust me. You have to believe me." So it comes from that, and it's realized that just because you're nervous or you're anxious about socializing doesn't mean that you're a bad person in any way, shape, or form. And this is
Hmm.
where media comes in. Media comes in. Social media especially gives an exaggeration as to how you should be or what society expects you to be. Like if you talk to somebody who's very charismatic, somebody who's very funny, you don't have to be like that. That's not
Hmm.
your calling. You know, you just accept yourself for who you are and be happy about that. So
Okay.
this is the conversation that I have. Say rejection is you shouldn't fear rejection. If somebody outright rejects you, that just means you and the person can't get along, and you should leave that person alone.
Okay. Yeah, and then like a big part of this probably comes down to just doing as much as you can to put yourself out there with many people. Because when you do that, you'll eventually realize that hey, there's so many different kinds of people, and if someone doesn't like you, or someone just doesn't have that ability to really connect, as you said, you're just not compatible, right? So I guess it comes down to a numbers game as well to actually go out there and talk to as
Yeah,
many people as possible and get used
yeah,
to not connecting.
yeah. You can talk to as many people as possible, but the most important thing is that you have to come to accept yourself. You have to come
Yeah,
to accept yourself with
yeah.
unconditional and positive regard. And then you accept people with the same attitude until they give you a reason not to.
Hmm.
Right? So you have to accept yourself. You have to have this conversation like, hey, you're a decent human being. That's it. You're a decent human being. You mean no harm. And once they're able, the core of healing is once you're able to accept yourself with unconditional positive regard, then you're able to see other people the same way,
Yeah.
right? So when you're
Yeah.
interacting with people, there's no pretentiousness or anything like that.
Hmm. Okay, yeah. So as you mentioned, you deal with people that are kind of like sociopathic and they think that they're so great. And then obviously people that, are like nervous or they feel like they're not good enough, they tend to be some great people as well. So this comes down to like a lack of confidence and self-belief, right? Now, you mentioned in your blog post that tracking and celebrating small victories is really important to build confidence, right? So if you're working with a person that's struggling with social anxiety, what would you really consider like a real victory, and how do they track that in a way that helps them build confidence?
Depending on how severe the social anxiety is, so if somebody who's very severe, I will have them, let's say if I'm working with a teenager or an adult, I say, okay, when you go to school, I want you to grade three people that you don't know.
Mm.
Okay. And then I'll say document it and track it. Because over time we're going to increase the number, right? Well then before you know it, I say I want you, oh, you have a class presentation coming up. This is fantastic. I want you to present in the class. I want you to talk about how you felt, and then I want you to write it down. For adults, I'll have them attend a networking group or something and speak in front of the group and what have you not. And so just slowly build their confidence. And what happens over time, if they follow the protocol, is that they become more comfortable talking to people and meeting people, you know,
Mm.
before we take it to the next stage. So these are examples of tracking small victories.
Okay. Now, like when it comes down to a victory, like you suggest, someone smiles back at you or like, says hi. Like, would you go down to the smallest bits of those interactions? Like, in what case would one might consider like an actual victory? Because sometimes, if you're really struggling with social anxiety, you might say, "Oh yeah, he's just smiling because he wants to be nice," or
Yeah,
she said,
people do
you know what I
that.
mean, right? Like, you know what
People
I
do
mean?
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you get past that?
So it's not so much as to the person's reaction. So if you say hello to a girl and she smiles back at you, that's very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's more of you engaging. The victory came that you engaged, and then you say to yourself, "Oh, that wasn't so bad,"
Uh huh.
right? That's where the victory comes
Yeah.
from. That you engage, no matter what the outcome is, you're actually going to be proud of yourself that you broke through that barrier and you engaged.
Hmm. Okay, so it's all about like small progress, right? So obviously, if
Yes,
you've never even put yourself out there, you should still consider it a victory because you've done something now that you haven't done in the past. And then slowly,
exactly.
slowly, you can build from there to like 2-minute conversations, 5-minute conversations, and eventually, you're like longer, longer conversations. So I guess it's a longer journey, right?
Yes.
Okay, now quick question: how long does it normally take for a person to break out of social anxiety?
If we if let's say if I go if I have a client who's severe and we go twice a week, you know, with intensity, in 3 months they're going to see notable progress. In
Really?
6 months, the progress is going to be even more significant. We're going to be making progress. Best case scenario, by 10 months to 1 year, uh, they're in a very good place. They're in a very good place. And this is for most cases. Everybody varies. Some people take longer, but in 10 months, they're in a very good place and they're in a very confident place.
Okay, and this is, like regardless of age, or is it specifically for the younger people?
Regardless of age. Regardless of
Really?
age.
So
Yeah.
1 year is not that long, to be honest, to really overcome this problem,
Yeah, it's
right?
all about intensity and putting yourself in those situations that you're afraid of.
Okay, so that should be pretty motivational for people to know that, because I mean, 1 year is obviously it's a long time, but it's not that long. It's not like a
It's not
ten
that
year. It's not like a 10 year journey. You know what I mean?
it's not that long. What
Yeah.
happens is some people are so hesitant that they pull back and they delay, right?
Hmm.
So if you pull back and delay, then your progress is going to be slow or stalled. But
Okay.
if you're intense about it and you're willing to put yourself out there, you absolutely will get better.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess it comes down to being consistent, working hard, staying committed. I guess that's pretty much the formula for anything, right? When you want to become
Yes.
successful at a specific skill. Okay. Cool. Cool. Now, one thing you also mentioned is the ability to be assertive, make confrontations if need be, and set boundaries. Now, this
Yes.
is not, yeah, so this is not something that, people with social anxiety just experience. Right? Almost everyone has this, issue because, like, you don't really want to make someone feel uncomfortable, right? But obviously, in this case, you kind of have to just accept, like, you are going to make people feel uncomfortable when you set boundaries, make confrontations, and be assertive. So how does someone really work on getting better at that? What's the healthiest way to make confrontations and set boundaries without being rude and coming off as a person that doesn't understand empathy?
It goes back to unconditional acceptance of self with positive regard
Okay.
because a lot of people with social anxiety have a bad habit of being walked over.
Mm.
If you come to accept yourself unconditionally, right, then you're not going to put up with disrespect or bad behavior towards you from anybody. Once you're in that place, you can easily say, hey, this behavior is not okay. Don't do it again. Or I'm going to cut ties with you. Something like that. Right? So once you're able to accept yourself and you say, oh, I'm okay, it becomes easier to set boundaries almost automatically without any training.
Okay. Yeah. Now, one of the things when it comes down to really accepting yourself is that if you don't have anyone that you have a like an actual bond with, it can be hard to accept yourself, right? Because you in your mind you're like, man, like no one's ever actually accepted me, so like why should I accept, like I'm good the way that I am. So when it comes down to really being comfortable with yourself, do you think it's just a one-on-one thing you have to do with yourself, or like do you have to go out there and actually build friendships first, and then it becomes a lot easier to accept yourself, or can you do it without having, I guess, close bonds yet?
You can do it with yourself. I you in that situation, if your self esteem is really low, you need a
Yeah.
professional to help you.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, because
Hmm.
from being it from a place of okay, now you can engage with other people, right? Because you don't want to fall for the mistake of habitually seeking validation from other people. That
Hmm.
you're not going to make any progress. Now you're dependent on other people to feel good about yourself,
Yeah.
right? You want. I mean, if you're a righteous person, if you have good intentions, you want to recognize that about yourself, right? Nobody's perfect. You need if you're doing bad things or if you're not doing the right thing, you need feedback from others and what have you not. But the first is that you have to accept yourself unconditionally.
Okay, so you're saying that if you just solve that problem first, you can make um confrontations in a much more natural way. Like it's not going to take much training, really.
Yes,
So if people don't know how to make confrontations, that means they're not comfortable with who they are.
exactly. If you
Really?
if you let if your friend said, "Hey, let me borrow your vehicle," and you say, "Okay, here's my keys," and they trashed your vehicle and they didn't fill up the gas tank, etc.,
Yeah.
right? So if you had a healthy sense of esteem, you say, "Hey, friend, you trashed my vehicle and you left the gas on E. That's very inconsiderate of you, right?" And how that friend responds to you will let you know if it's a relationship you want to continue.
Okay. Yeah. So the other person also has to have the ability to accept their mistakes, right? And if they
Exactly.
don't, then it's probably time for you to okay. Hmm.
Right? So you don't want people to disrespect you or just walk all over you.
Hmm. Okay, so that's really interesting. So, but like, what if someone actually does feel comfortable in their own skin, but they're scared to put themselves in a situation where they don't know what's going to happen, right? Because when you're not certain about the outcome, that tends
Hmm.
to make people feel a bit like scared, right? So is it the same thing with those people as well, or is that like a different issue?
Well, that's context matters. Is the
Yeah, context
person you're
matters. Yeah,
confronting unstable?
yeah, yeah,
Does the
yeah,
person have a history of acting out violently or something like that?
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Okay.
Is it a say is it a girlfriend? Are you afraid of losing the relationship and what have you not if you confront her for bad behavior and what have you not?
Yeah.
So these contexts matter because if you're secure in who you are, you can just tell people the truth about how you feel about a certain behavior they exhibit.
Mm. Okay, so I guess one of the things you could really tell yourself is the way the other like if you're being polite and obviously just trying to approach it in like a friendly way, you can tell yourself, if they have a certain reaction, that's pretty much on them, right? Like my job is to stand up for myself, be polite and be respectful, and just put it out there. And if they have an issue, that's kind of their problem. So you kind of get yourself away from the situation and don't kind of attach their response to your self worth. That's kind of I guess where it really comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Now, the other thing you mentioned is the ability to carry conversations, right? So again, in this day and age, people struggle with that because most people are not used to having like a sit down, long conversation, right? And if you don't have the ability to carry a conversation, you're never going to get to a deeper level and build friendships based on that. So how would you tell a person to work on the ability to like actually talk with others and carry a conversation, not just in a one-on-one situation, but in a group setting as well? Like, what are the main things you have to keep in mind if you want to work on carrying a conversation?
So in a one-on-one situation, you want to seek to understand before being understood. So this calls for a lot of listening.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So if you're telling me a story, I'm going to listen intently to you. All right. And then I might say, okay, so you lent him your car. Yes, I lent him my car. And you're going to feel hurt. So if I paraphrase something you said, just for clarification, you're going to feel hurt. And then that conversation is going to flow automatically because I'm engaged. I'm paying
Yeah.
attention to the person. I care about the story. The person can sense that I care about the story. And then they're going to ask me questions about myself,
Yeah.
and we're going to reciprocate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a group setting, you also want to listen, right? And you want to listen intently, and you also want to paraphrase. You kind of it's because a bit tricky because you want to wait, you don't want to interrupt anybody, but you want to paraphrase to show that you're listening to the person. And if they have a question of you, they can ask you a question. And you also want to make eye contact to the speaker.
Hmm. And when it comes down to making eye contact, like, is it just when they're talking or when you're talking as well?
Depends on who asks you the question, but when they're talking, you want to make eye contact with them.
Okay. Okay.
When you're talking to the group, you want to scan the group. You know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Okay. So paraphrase when you're in group settings, and then kind of have like a rebound effect, and then you can give your opinion and so on and so forth. And then one on one, it's more about listening and answering or asking questions. I guess that's kind of the
yes.
main idea. And then your ability to ask, I guess, good questions that carry the conversation forward would really become from just being able to listen.
Hmm.
So like this is another thing as well. A lot of people have a hard time trying to listen, right? Because it sounds like an easy thing to do, but like sometimes people like they act like they're listening, but like they're really not. Like they're somewhere else, right? So like how do you mentally get like yourself in a place to get better at listening? Because sometimes I guess people maybe because of ego they tend to think that, oh, this person's not saying anything worthwhile, so what's the point, right? Right,
Well,
like you know what I mean. So
yeah, you have to be honest. It's a politeness issue. You have to be honest with yourself,
yeah, yeah,
right? So if you're having a one-on-one conversation, it's about it's about give and take. If you're having a
yeah,
one-on-one conversation with somebody, even if whether you agree or disagree, you want to give the person your full undivided attention.
Hmm.
They're going to respond in kind. Most of the time, people are going to respond in time. And this is how you make friends. This is how you get to know people. This is how you get people to trust you,
Hmm.
right?
Okay, yeah. Now, what if someone wants to work on their ability to give input, right? Because sometimes people they might be good at listening, but they won't really know how to respond and say things that might be relevant to the conversation, right? So I guess if people want to really grow their ability to give insight into a conversation which can carry it even further, what would be the best way to do that?
So if you're in a group setting and there's a conversation being had, some conversations don't require inputs.
Uh-huh. Okay.
All right.
Hmm.
If it doesn't require, you don't have to say anything. You can just simply let the person know that you're hearing what they say. Right.
Hmm.
You're not obligated to give inputs for the sake of giving inputs. Just to understand
Okay.
and comprehend what the person is saying and what's going on there.
Hmm.
So for me, if I'm in a group conversation and I want to give input because it's something I'm really passionate about and I believe it will benefit the people listening.
Okay, so you're saying it's not really that important to focus on giving input. It seems like listening is like 90% of the whole game here
Mhm.
when it comes down to being social. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Now, how can people use the online world and like technology in a healthy way to build their social skills? Because I know obviously you're not a big fan of social media and so on and so forth, but sometimes with social media you could find groups and communities that you relate with, right? Which can help you build your social circle. So how does a person balance that? How do you use um like the internet to really build your ability to be social and get more skilled in that department?
I have used meetup groups,
Meetup groups.
right? Yeah, meetup groups to and Facebook groups to get clients to say, hey, go attend this group and see how it goes, right?
Okay.
So he finds them online, but he goes in person and he meets with them, and then we talk about it. So this is at the advanced stage.
Hmm. Okay, so meetup groups. So I guess that's kind of the only area that you should focus on when it comes to social media. Is there any other way, or would that be the only thing that you recommend?
Yeah, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
I'm not against social media. Social media is what you make of it,
Hmm.
right? So, for example, I put out videos about my practice on social media. It's just that when you're on social media, you want to have a healthy perspective of what's going on,
Hmm.
okay, and what's being said, right? And your direct personal experiences counts for something more than what's coming back through you through the screen. But yeah, meetup groups. So if you struggle with social anxiety, meetup groups. If you're working with a professional, you go to these groups. Now you're experiencing,
The
you're
community. Mhm.
socializing with people, you're talking to people, you're mixing it up, and then you
Yeah.
can go back and you can exchange notes, and you can go back do some things differently, and then you can go and attend another group,
Okay.
right? But immersing yourself in these experiences leads to improvements.
Okay. Got it. So just going back to the social media aspect of things. Now, like you mentioned, for younger people, you'd recommend 16 as the age to really start getting into social media. Now, in general, do you would you is there a certain number that people should keep in mind when it comes down to how long they should be spending time on social media per day without it getting to a place of being unhealthy? Or again, is it just based on the content that you're specifically consuming?
Um, it's like if you watch a documentary on YouTube,
Yeah.
the documentary is 2 hours. It's what it is, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But
Hmm.
if you're chatting online or I don't know what whatever it is that you're
Scrolling.
doing for
Yeah.
more than an hour,
Yeah.
then you should be honest with yourself that you don't really have much going on for you. And this is something that should be addressed, right?
Yeah.
So you can ask yourself,
Yeah.
okay, what else can I be doing instead of habitually being online? What else can I do with my time?
Okay. That's pretty interesting. So if you're scrolling for more than an hour and just kind of like, I guess wasting time, that probably means you have something else wrong in life. And you're
Yes.
probably bored, there's nothing much going on, you don't really know, or there's not really like a sense of direction. And
Yes.
oh, okay. So yeah, so that's probably a good symptom to keep in mind when it comes down to how much time you spend on social media. Okay, so it seems like these problems can just be solved by the way you live life and just how you choose to approach the day, right? Because again, I mean,
Yes.
I guess you won't really be really experiencing the effects of social anxiety with social media if you're a busy person that's being productive and engaging with the world and not just sitting at home and scrolling, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so okay, in terms of engaging with the world, how much in-person social interaction should people aim for per week, like just in general, to make sure that they're getting the proper benefits of being social? Is there a certain level or no?
Well, there's not necessarily a certain level. It's about pushing past your comfort zone. So teenagers get to go to school, adults get to go to work. Most of them have to work with people, right? So, even if you've never been talking to with your coworkers, start
Hmm.
practicing to talk to them and then make plans for the weekend. So it's about really pushing past your comfort zone.
Again, I guess this is going to be something that comes down to your personal level, right?
Mhm.
What you're comfortable with. Okay. Okay. Now, here's the thing when it comes down to like how do you know if you're pushing yourself too hard though? Because sometimes people can get socially taxed, right? Um
If you're overwhelmed, a lot of people with social anxiety get overwhelmed easily.
okay.
Pull back, take a break,
Okay.
go scale it back and go with what works for you. So a lot of people, because a lot of social people with social anxiety, they tend to be introverts and they just simply, there's a certain degree or certain number of people they interact with that they just need a breather. That's okay.
Got it. Okay.
It's okay to pull back,
Okay.
right? The
Hmm.
goal is not to be fearful of socializing with people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Ugo, this was a really fast-paced episode. I had a great time with this. This is full of information, and I know it'll definitely help a lot of people. So obviously, you specialize in this area, right? So if
Yes.
people want to look into your work and obviously look more in depth into it, where would you tell them to go?
Road2resolutions.com, and that's ROAD, the number two,
Hmm.
resolutions, it spells RESOLUTIONS.com. And I can email or text it to you.
Yeah, yeah. I will link that in the video description below, and they can check it out. Like, is there any books that you want to also talk about, or no?
Thank you for bringing that up. I completely forgot.
No problem. No
I
problem.
recently wrote a book. It's called Neuromastery: Retraining Your Brain to Conquer Anxiety, Fear, and Panic Attacks. It's out on Amazon. It's called Neuromastery.
Neuromastery. Okay.
So you can get it in paperback or Kindle version.
Okay, great. Yeah, I will link that in the video description below as well, and they can definitely go and check it out if need be.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ugo. This was really fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'll send you an email.
Yeah, yeah. No problem. No problem. I'll be waiting for that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You as well. You as well, sir.